All right, welcome back. So this is going to be my first try grinding some of this glass. So just to start things out, the first thing that I'm going to need, obviously I have my grinding tool, I have my mirror blank, I've got my grinding workstation here, and for the sake of the video, I'm not going to be walking around this barrel. That's typically what people would do with a setup like this, is that as you go, you would say grind a series of strokes here, and then you would take a step, rotate your mirror a little bit, and then do some more, and continue that process. Take a little step, rotate, do some more, take another little step, do a little bit more. However, because the camera is set up on this side over here, I won't really have the room to go all the way around. So in this case, what I'm probably going to do is I'm just going to move around. I'll probably do a section of this, and then I may just move the camera a little bit farther out of the way. But I wanted to kind of zoom up a little bit so you could kind of see a little bit more of what I'm doing here. Now, because the tool's on the bottom, I'm not going to put the grit on the tool. I'm going to put the grit on the mirror so that it will kind of stick to the mirror using water. And that way the grit will be up here, so when I place it onto my tool, that the grit isn't just going to fall down into the bottom in these cracks and get completely lost, and then it just doesn't really grind much of anything. So to help me, I've got a spray bottle here, and it's just filled with water with 1 or 2 drops of dish soap. I saw that in a video by Ed Jones, and he suggested putting a little bit of dish soap in here. And what that does is it changes the surface tension of the water and helps the grit stay stuck to the mirror or stay stuck up on top of the ceramic tiles rather than all falling down into the cracks here. So we're going to do that. I'm going to use this to help keep everything lubricated as I'm grinding. You've got to make sure to keep it wet, because the last thing you want to do is breathe glass dust. That is extremely bad for your health. Yeah, we don't want to do it. That's not good. So let's get started a little bit. I'm going to grab some grit. This is the 80 grit silicon carbide. I'm going to go ahead and open this puppy up. There we go. Put that in the box. And so if I open that up, you can kind of see what that looks like. It's a little sparkly, which is kind of nice. But it's extremely coarse, and will do a fine job of grinding all of this stuff. Now, to put this stuff onto here, I'm going to use a plastic spoon. So give me 1 second, I'll grab that. Plus that way I can use it to get feedback and show people what I'm doing, and if I'm screwing it up, they can tell me. Okay, so I've got some plastic spoons. I'm going to use separate spoons for each grit. So I'm just going to throw most of these in the box. And we're going to use one here for my 80 grit. So give it a little bit of water. Okay. And I understand that you can do too much water too. You can kind of feel if it's actually grinding. If there's too much water, the grit might all kind of flow down into the cracks. If there's not enough water, it's going to feel kind of harsh. If there's no water, that's just bad. We got to have this wet at all times. So we're just going to use a little bit of grit. Sprinkle a little on. My understanding is less is more here. So we're just going to put a little bit of grit on. Good enough. Just going to cover that up. Okay. And here we go. So to begin, my understanding is we need to use what are called chordal strokes. Now, a chordal stroke basically means that I'm going to move my mirror closer to the edge here, and then I'm just going to move this back and forth this way. And a chord, in terms of math or geometry, is going to be where you have an arc and you take one point on one side and one point on the other. That jump across there on the two ends of that arc, that is a chord. So what I'm trying to do is shoot sort of across the edge here, taking the center of this mirror blank, keeping it near the edge, and just going back and forth and kind of trying to keep it along here. You can hear it. And we want to really, again, kind of keep that near the edge. You don't want to wander into the middle, because what we're doing is by applying pressure in the middle, that's going to apply pressure more along this bottom edge underneath here, which is going to carve out the center. That's going to make this glass blank become concave underneath here. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're going to try and put pressure down on the center so that as I'm doing a chordal stroke, that it's going to end up help grind out the center section of the mirror and make it convex or concave underneath. The tool will become convex. I can kind of see that the grit is falling down underneath there, so I'm gonna have to see if I can do something about that as I'm going, but I've done about 8 or 10 strokes on this side, and so what we would do is we would take a step, rotate the mirror, okay, so I've got about 10 strokes. Take another step, rotate the mirror, and then do it again. And you can hear it, I can hear it anyway, that there's not a lot of grit. I'm basically pressing against these tiles and there's really not a lot of grit there. But that's probably because of how I attached all of my ceramic tiles to the tool. So I'm just gonna, for now, just put a little bit more water on my mirror blank, just put a little bit more grit. Again, less is more. Want it to stick, but we probably don't want it to be so wet that it washes off. There we go. That sounds better. So again, take a step. I'm going to rotate the mirror just a little bit. Okay. We're just going to repeat that process over and over. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the camera over a little bit farther out of my way so that I can actually start walking around this barrel and continue the grinding process. to feel it again. We can kind of start to see that milky stuff, right? That's glass. It's glass dust. So we're gradually starting to grind a little bit. Awesome. You can probably hear the sound changing a little bit. It almost sounds like more grit is making contact, and that's probably because not only do we have a little glass dust in there, but the grit itself is gradually breaking down as I'm applying pressure and I'm grinding. So as I go, I can try and sort of bring some of this older grit, the coarser stuff that fell down, back out and bring it up on top, or I can put more grit down, but eventually it's going to kind of mud up and I'm going to have to just rinse this off. Yeah. Okay. Just going to go after. Have to apply a little more. Okay, so go around a couple more times. We can see it again, got some milky stuff. The grit appears to be breaking down a bit, but it does seem to be working a little better. The groove's filled up a bit with some water and grit, and it seems like it's keeping a little bit more of it on top, which is great. So rather than wash all this off, I think I'm going to leave this for now and just apply a little more water and grit, and we'll keep this going. It's probably a little hard to see, but the mirror is starting to gradually look a little bit frosty, which is good. That means we're grinding. So, I'm going to go ahead and take the tool, rinse this guy off too. Okay, we're ready to keep going. Okay. Interesting that now that I have a slight grind on the mirror, the grit is actually staying up on top a little better. That's good. But I've gone around a few more times, and you can kind of tell that this is getting, it looks frostier and frostier, especially when it dries. You can really start to see some sort of frostiness, white stuff on there, and it's just ground. That surface is getting coarser and coarser as I go. You can kind of see there's some little spots here that maybe haven't gotten quite as much, but as I keep going, it should gradually even itself out. But you know, as I'm going, it's grinding. It's definitely taking some material off in the middle by doing those chordal strokes. Remember, chordal, kind of along the edge, and then as I go, turn, rotate the mirror the opposite way a little bit, and then again, keeping the center of that mirror along the edge here. So going 3-4 inches across. So I grab my handy straight edge here. Look carefully. I can definitely see that there is a gap underneath there now. It's kind of deepening in the center a little bit. And I can use my feeler gauges. And so for a 6-inch mirror, we're looking for about 47 thousandths of an inch deep. And using the numbers on my feeler gauges, I can figure out what that needs to be. And I can see where I am right now and how far I have yet to go. So I'm going to start with one that's around 20 thousandths. Let's see if I'm even that far. So can I slide that puppy underneath there? I can. How about that? Just a little bit of extra space under there. So we'll bump this up from 20, let's try 25. Might need to take these feeler gauges apart too so I can get right in the middle. How about that? That actually also fits underneath there. This is actually going faster than I thought it would. So let's try 30. This one might not be quite there. And trying to go right in the center. Okay, that one's bumping into my straight edge here. So that one's just a little bit too short. So let's try 28. Let's see where we are. Okay. 28 is still hitting. Go down just a little bit. My next one is 26, so try that. It feels like it's just barely catching. So we're probably at about 25 thousandths of an inch. Maybe 26. So that's about where we're at. So that didn't take long at all. I thought it was going to take longer. So we'll continue on and see what we can do. Now, if it's grinding mostly in the middle and not quite out near the edges here, then I'm going to have to see what I can do to fix that. And probably going to fix that by moving my strokes a little bit farther into the center as I go, just to try and get it more of a spherical shape. So, yeah, let's see what we can do here. Now, ideally we want more pressure in the middle, again, to help grind it out so that we can get down to that spherical shape, the bottom, at least in the center, down to almost the maximum depth. Ideally, I saw stuff you could put your whole body weight on this. It's grinding fast enough. I don't know if I really need to do that, but I could just kind of put my palm in the middle. And that'll, again, help give it a little more pressure. I believe I read that the silicon carbide works better when you have a little more pressure. So. So last time we were at 26, so we should be deeper at this point. See if I can actually, yeah, get that underneath. Right in the center there. Let's see if we're up to 28. Yeah, I can get 28 under. And unfortunately the next biggest one that I have is, I don't know, do I have a 30? I do have a 30. Okay. So we get up to 30. Okay, just starting to catch a little bit on 30. So we're probably pretty close to 30 thousandths. So knowing that, every wet, again, that's every kind of cycle of putting new grit down, seems to take me down a couple thousandths of an inch. And I can continue to sort of gauge that then by how much longer I need to go. So if I'm at 30 thousandths and I want to go to say 40, we'll call it 44 thousandths, right? So that's 14 thousandths of an inch deeper. That's going to be about 7 more of these wets. So I'm going to continue this until I get to about that step, when I'm about, say, 44 thousandths of an inch deep, and we'll go from there. I believe we want to take it close but not quite to that depth. So I'm going to continue on here. And I believe that's 2 more. So I want to kind of verify what I was measuring and see if doing a couple of wets drops the center down by another 4 thousandths of an inch. 35. So the thickest that I have here is 35 for a single feeler gauge. Yeah, so it doesn't quite fit under there. So that tells me it's probably about 34. So, yep, it's probably about right. So we managed to get 32 and not quite 35. So probably 34. So yeah, every time I go around and do another wet, I'm looking at about another 2 thousandths of an inch. So, having confirmed that, being at 34, I've got about 5 more of these to go, and I should be at 44, and then we'll probably pause there and decide if I want to drop down to a lower grit, smaller grit, or if I want to continue all the way until I hit 47. So, as I'm going, I'm also trying to watch this chamfer around the edge here, because you don't want that to get too thin, otherwise you risk chipping out on the edge of your blank here. So far it's looking fine, but just going to keep an eye on it and make sure. But that sort of thin area that hadn't quite ground out yet is gradually becoming more and more ground, and that's looking kind of nice. So, yeah. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and stop the video here, and we'll pick it up when I get to the end. Alright, so I'm getting really close here. I just took a measurement after a few more wets, and using my straight edge here and some of my feeler gauges, I can just barely sneak the very tip of the feeler gauge under when I have it combination of 22 and 23 thousandths. So we're at about 45 thousandths of an inch deep. And again, for a 6-inch diameter mirror, I never mentioned my focal ratio. I'm going for f8 focal ratio. So the higher the focal ratio is, the shallower the curve on the mirror is. The lower the focal ratio, the steeper the curve is on your mirror. And this one at f8 should be at about 47 thousandths of an inch when I reach my full depth for an f8 curve. I don't think it's going to hurt to do one more and just take it all the way to 47. And that way, I can make sure I've got some grind all the way to the very edges here. I can see that I must be putting a little more pressure on this side than on this side, because there's still a little bit of a lighter, less ground edge on this side than on this side. So I'm not sure exactly what I want to do about that. I think it might just be because I keep starting here at this spot when I have fresh grit, and that could be grinding a little bit heavier here. But I'll see if I can keep an eye on this. Maybe put a little mark on this side just to make sure that I'm trying to keep the grind even on both sides. This side, the grind, let me turn this just a little bit so I can check it. Yeah, it's still there a tiny bit, but it is clearly closer to the edge on this side than on this side here. So I'm going to see if I can put maybe a little more pressure over on this side and a little less on this side just to keep the grind even on both sides. So I'll probably flip this over and put some initial pressure on there to really get a little more grinding on that side. But anyway, really close. I got one more wet to do. The other thing that I wanted to point out, and something that I've seen a lot in demonstrations and stuff, is when we take our mirror blank and we throw it on top of here, right? We want to make sure that we're getting really good contact as this is grinding. The mirror is grinding a little thinner in the middle. This is grinding a little thin around the edges. And so we're getting a convex curve here and a concave curve here. Ideally what we want is we want these two curves to match. And that should be happening as I'm going around and around and rotating the mirror and walking around. We should be effectively trying to average out the grinding all the way around on both of these so that they're really similar the entire way around. But you can check it if you place your mirror on top, and you can give it a little move here if you want. I might need just a touch more water. But what we're looking for, you can see all of my tiles are touching, every single one. If I move these around a little to kind of pop those bubbles, then we can see we're getting really nice contact on all of the tiles in here. Hopefully you can see that. I've forgotten to autofocus here. So let's see if I can zoom in on that for you guys. There you go. And so hopefully you can see that, right? That we're getting good contact on all those tiles. That's going to be really key later on to make sure that we have good contact all the way around. So as we get to finer and finer grits, you're not going to be taking off nearly as much. So we want to start with good contact after the first rough grinding and continue getting good contact throughout the rest, because it's going to be harder to correct later at finer grits. But anyway, so this is looking pretty good. And if we take this and we turn it, we can kind of test it. But you can see again, really good contact all the way around. Again, if I do that, you can see again right away, solid contact all the way around. So that's looking good. Like I said, one more wet to go, and it should hopefully be right around that 47 thousandths mark. But now, if I was super picky about this, and my understanding is if you're doing lenses, not mirrors, you have to be significantly pickier about maintaining a consistent thickness across the entire thing. If I'm grinding more on one side than the other, that means that this thickness is going to be higher on one side and lower on the other, and that's not really great. A couple thousandths probably not going to kill anything, but when it comes to lenses, that could make a fairly significant difference. So you have to really pay attention to that if you're grinding lenses. Throw on some grit. And I've been finding that if I throw a little grit, especially over here, because this side seems to have less grit by the time I get over there. So I've been throwing a little bit of grit over on that side. That seems to help. So again, this side is the side that needs a little help, so I'm going to flip it over. And as I put my pressure, I'm just going to move my pressure a little bit closer to the inside. Still mostly in the center of the mirror, but just a little bit more on that side. This way. And I think something that I'm not doing correctly here, and I'll have to get clarification on this when I share my my update on Cloudy Nights, but I think instead of paying as much attention about going around the barrel, I need to be paying more attention to how many times the mirror rotates around towards me. And that'll make sure that I'm actually doing more, getting an even distribution of grinding on the mirror, rather than worrying about walking around the barrel specifically at a certain number of times. Let's see where we're at, because I'm kind of curious if we're at or maybe even past our 47 thousandths of an inch. If we went too far, we can even it out. It's not the end of the world here, but so 23 and 24, there's 47. I'm trying to get all the little bits of grit and stuff off of here, throwing off my measurement. Okay, that just slips under there. And let's see if I went too far. I'm going to go up to, let's see, 49. Hopefully I didn't go that far, but nope, yep, a little bit too far. So there's 49, slips right under. Okay, let's see what happens if we go up to 51. Wow, okay, so even 51. And I don't have a way to get to 53, but I can get to 54. Okay, 54 starts to hit a little bit. So we're probably at like 52, 53. Yeah, probably 52, 53. Now, typically, from my understanding, the way we fix this, since we went a little deep in the middle, is we actually flip these. Mirror goes on the bottom, and then I use the tool on the top of the mirror, and that should flatten the curve out, because as I do the same kind of strokes, it's going to take down the edges of the mirror and shallow that curve down a little bit. So we're going to give it a shot. Let's see what we do. So let me wash off the tool, because there's a ton of gunk on here now. There we go. All right. So again, mirror goes on the bottom this time. And let's see, we had from this side to this side. So this area here is the one that I want to put more pressure on. So I'm going to start there, set my mirror in. Okay, give it a little spritz just to wet it down, and give it some grit. Again, tool goes on top this time. And so we're going to start over here. Again, doing chordal strokes, but a little bit more towards the center. that side, and then again. I think I should have gone the other way. Definitely louder with the tool on the top. Oh, no, I think I did that right the first time. Oh no, it chipped. It chipped. Shoot. Okay. So, yeah, I'm not exactly sure why that chipped out. I still have a good chamfer on there, but I'm going to have to be really careful. I could feel it grabbing a little bit, so maybe I just need a little more water, but that's not really great. I have a little chip there, but hey, first mirror. Probably put a little too much pressure on the edge of the mirror though. Okay. Yeah, it's unfortunate that that chipped, but this is just the way it goes. So we'll have to try and smooth that down so it doesn't chip any further. Just try and go really gently around that area. Okay. So I'm going to check it. I'm going to rinse this off. I'm going to check it. And that sucks. Alright, so I went ahead and rinsed this thing off. Get all the grit and junk off of that. Let's put this in the center so you can see it. So I'm going to go ahead and measure it. So here's that chip. That really does suck. You can kind of see it here. There's a bit of a chip out. It's not real deep, but it's definitely a pretty sizable area. So I might see what I can do to smooth that and keep it from chipping anymore. But I want to measure this. So okay, that's catching just a little bit. So my guess is we're probably around 47 to 48. There, see 47 goes under nicely. Rotate a little. Goes under nicely, does not catch at all. There, yeah, just barely squeaks under. So we're really close, 47 to 48 thousandths of an inch. This is probably good enough. I think I can correct that without any issues when I switch to the next smaller grits. So I'm going to go ahead and clean up and we'll wrap up here. Alright, so I think I hit my target. around that 47, 48 thousandths. So I'm just going to rinse this guy off, put it away, and we'll come back for the next session. I got to make sure I get all this grit off. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with this. I might just turn it inside out, or even toss it and put a fresh bag on here, or get some different plastic that I don't use this entire thing. But this worked pretty well. This worked pretty well. I can probably pull that up, and it's going to be almost no grit. There's some couple spots that wore through right here and right here, so a tiny bit will squeak through, but otherwise it should keep my grinding platform pretty clean. Anyway, I'll get cleaned up, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.